Morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Discovery Channel. This is Tom O'Connor from We're All Dying Here in the wake of Jazz Fest, which
Dying.
just wrapped up.
Dying.
Huh?
Come on. Dying?
Dying, man. We're dying. We're set. First
And
of all, we're exhausted.
depression.
Second of all, we're so sad that all the music is gone. And yeah, it's like overamped. The entire city is overamped. And the best part, of course, is the people who get stuck at the airport because they go out to the airport and fall asleep and miss their flight, and then they're wandering around. Yeah.
Entertainment. So
Right. So, Rocky, as our old buddy Brownie Marine used to say, my partner in mischief, in Tel Aviv today, Rocky.
in Tel Aviv today. So
All right.
heading stateside next week. Looking forward to a quick little visit. But
Yes, you and I are both going to be hopefully in the Baltimore, D.C. area at the end of next week, and even more. Hopefully, we'll get together.
Absolutely.
But we never have any luck doing that, so I'm not.
It's usually it's the once every 3 years that we actually can get together for a cigar.
Right. That's right.
See if we can make it work.
So we are, as you can see from your screen, we are doing a special Brady Brunch version of the Discovery Channel today, with the entire Masters Conference team. For those of you who have been asleep for the last 20 years and don't know what's going on in our profession, the Masters Conference is self-described as a boutique thought leadership forum, which doesn't do it justice for its impact in getting people into a room and having great discussions. And again, hopefully you'll know, and we'll talk about it more in a minute, but it was founded in 2006 by our old friend, the late Robert Childress. Robert was a force in our profession, known for a number of ventures. I first met him that I recall when he had founded Wave Software, which was an early pioneer in not just deduping in any fashion, but also reasonably priced, easy to use deduping. And then he went on to form the Masters Conference. Unfortunately, Robert left us, passed away in 2021. But this team has, with a slight divergence for COVID, which kind of interrupted a few things in the country. But these folks here have been able to keep that motor running. And as I didn't even realize 12 shows this year.
Yes.
And so you're really pushing it forward. We're going to let them talk about that in a minute. But first, I'd like each of you, if you wouldn't mind, to take a few minutes just to introduce yourself and talk about yourself and tell us a bit about your background for the people who may not know who you are. So we'll start with Rick Clark.
And Rick, specifically, I think we want to hear a little bit about just how do you end up in e-discovery? Like, what was your
how did you get shanghaied into this crazy?
Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Rocky. Really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you both and as well as our team here. My history is kind of funny. I started in college. I did this internship where you sell books door to door. This was in the 90s, and so it was fairly safe back then. But post college, apparently.
Wait a minute, where are you selling books?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so that was fun. So I grew up in Northern California, and so I'm a California boy out in Gaffney, South Carolina, Hartwell, Georgia, the second summer, and in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, the third summer. But
Wow.
So I'm out there sort of learning all about the South, and I'd actually never moved back. I've stayed. I live in Greensboro, North Carolina. I love the East Coast, and
sounds like an episode of Justified.
Right, yeah. I'm out in the country, so if you hear gunshots, that's just people having fun out there. So
yeah,
no, that'd be my neighbors probably waking
mine.
up. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
And so when I graduated college, apparently it was very kind of our niche industry had a magnet to pull in folks like me into litigation support companies. So I started with a company called Digital Legal Services in Orlando, Florida. And so I was pushing boxes at first, and then it turned into basically scanning and imaging, and then e-discovery. And so worked for them for a few years. And then I synced up with Robert Childress, who, as we all very well know, and Tom, thank you for your sentiments and what you said about him. But so he and I started a company called Wave Software. It was all about taking massive amounts of data, typically at the time PSTs, NSF files, culling them down and making it ready for review. We started the Masters Conference actually in a sort of way to create interest and prospects for us, because we only had at the time ILTA and Legal Tech. There wasn't the Georgetown and EDI, none of those existed. And so we started the Masters Conference in a Panera Bread right there in the middle of Orlando. And I remember the first one was at the Reagan Center. And so, and I was, very much behind the scenes. I didn't, put myself as the face of Masters, certainly at the time. That was Robert's thing. And I loved doing that because he was just always in his element. And, but I remember the first year we had all sorts of sponsors.
It was hard, I know, to push him out there to talk to people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't take much. Yep. And so, but my first memory of, well, not first, but like the main one was we had all sorts of sponsors, but not a ton of attendees. And so here's Rick out there, with 2 satchels on K Street, walking up and down, dropping off invitations to all the mailboxes at Sidley and Wiley and like all these different firms to get more people there. And then then it started. And so but I've been in the industry since the early 2000s, so over 20 years. I've then, since Wave Software, stayed on the technology side of things. So I've been working with companies like iConnect, TCDI, and currently I'm now with Cloud9 through an acquisition of a company I'd started with Trent Livingston called ESI Analyst. That was purchased by Cloud9 almost 2 years ago now.
Oh, cool. All right. Thanks. Next up, we have next in the batting order is number 9, Marla Moore.
Number 9, I'm at the bottom. Wait a second.
No, you're number 2. You're number 2 in the batting order.
There we go.
Number 2 in the batting order. Yeah. So Marla's an old friend and colleague from Southern Cal. Marla, why don't you tell us a little about yourself for the folks?
Oh, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Rocky. Just like Rick said, thank you so much for having us on. I started out as a paralegal. I refer to myself as a recovering paralegal. And I am not going to tell you how many years ago that was, because it's actually longer than Rick, and I didn't want to date myself too badly.
So 2003, right?
I'm sorry?
2003. About
2000. Yeah, 2003.
You're 18. You're 18.
Yeah, sure.
2003. And yep. Okay.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Thanks, Rocky.
Yes. Anytime.
Anyways, I love the law, but I didn't like sitting behind the desk all day long and being in a cubicle or an office with no one to talk to. So I got into sales, and I actually started out in copier sales, and I did that for 5 years because that's when technology was actually coming about. Turned it around and got back into legal sales. So I started out in legal publishing, worked at West Group, at the time West Group years ago, got into depositions, attorney services, and I always, when e-discovery was emerging, I really started getting into it. For some reason, it just caught my attention. I now call myself a little geeky, nerdy. And I've been involved with it ever since pretty much the beginning. I met Robert years ago, and he approached me and asked me to work with everybody as a cabinet member at the time. And, it's very hard to say no to Robert. Absolutely loved him. And so that's my story, very quick and brief.
Excellent.
I did say no to Robert.
What?
I did. He had approached me to get involved also in like 07, something like that, or 06, like right at the beginning. And I was involved at the time. I was on the editorial board of Litigation Support Today magazine. And we were running our own conference. So we felt there was a conflict, and I had to bow out. But it was hard to say no. It was not an easy thing to say no to him. But yeah. Cool.
Great.
Let's move on.
Okay. Number 3 in the batting order is Bruce Malter. Bruce?
Hey, thanks, Tom, Rocky. Really appreciate this. My technology career goes way, way back when I started in the computer industry, taking a marketing job with Zenith Data Systems. Way, way, long, long time ago. But in 1997, my wife and I had an opportunity to uh, go to Tianjin, China with Motorola and spent 3 years there. And unbeknownst to me, that's kind of when my discovery career really kind of got started, because started working with the legal department on counterfeit investigations. There's counterfeit products are run rampant in Asia, and
Yeah.
so I was working with the legal department to.
And I'm sorry to interrupt. Where is that in China? What part of China was that?
About an hour and a half south of Beijing. It's a port city. It's where
Gotcha.
most of the factories are in China. Only the third largest city. Anyways, Motorola moved us back to Atlanta in 2000, and I left pretty quickly and took a director of marketing job with Icon, and that was kind of my official move into this space. Within a year, I left and helped one of my colleagues start an e-discovery company called E-Litigation Technologies in Atlanta. Unfortunately, it only lasted about 3 years. We did some great stuff there, but just business-wise, it wasn't run very well. And that's when I moved to a company called Project Leadership, an IT consulting company in Chicago, which was a really fun job because they brought me on to kind of build what we call litigation solutions, e-discovery. And it was kind of a blank board what I got to do. I got to really build a specialized group that focused on investigations, forensic investigations, and consulting. We helped a lot of law firms and corporate legal departments build their e-discovery practice, and then over time built a lot of other services, which was really cool.
And you had a pretty cool team also, if I remember, over there.
Yeah, I had a great team. I mean, we were doing a lot of forensics investigations, and luckily I was able to build a really solid team, and they're all doing great in this industry as of today. And that was a lot of fun. I can go on and on with hours, some really fun stories, and maybe that's for another discussion. But,
yeah. That's when we're actually sitting at a bar and
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
in an
yeah,
airport someplace. Yeah.
Although I'm sure we all can have some neat stories back in the 2000s when we were just trying to figure things out and using some really, really bad technology to solve problems. So, but I met Robert and Dan Regard back in the mid 2000s when I went to the first couple masters conferences in DC, and I think after the second, maybe the third one in 2009, at the end of the conference, I'm just standing there talking to Robert and Dan. And I said, "Wow, this is great. If you brought this to Chicago, I guarantee you'd fill the room." Left the conference, flew back home, didn't really think much about that conversation. 2 weeks later, Robert and Dan call me up out of the blue and say, "All right, Bruce, we're going to do Chicago, but I have to help them."
Right.
Within 4 months, we put together a conference in Chicago. We did it at the Willis Tower, Sears Tower, as we call it in Chicago still. And we had about 150 people attend, and the response was fantastic. And that was really the start of taking the Masters to different cities. And we're still doing it today. And, it's going great. We just had Chicago 2 weeks ago, and once again, it was one of the better conferences we've had.
Cool. And where are you
now? Where am I now? Well, this week I'm in Chicago, but I kind of split my time Chicago and Denver now. So
cool. And working for?
Oh, I'm working for Concilio.
There you go.
Yeah, one of the smaller vendors, right?
I've heard of the. All right, thanks, Bruce. And batting cleanup is Richard's younger brother, Kevin Clark, our power hitter in the group. Kevin, and that was a joke for all the confused people on the audience. No relation.
That we
But also more handsome, I'd say, more handsome.
All right, I wasn't going there.
That's comment.
You know,
Yes,
You got to
yes.
squabble
the
over
bit.
between yourselves. Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes. So good day, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. We are excited to be here. Thank you very much for having us, Tom and Rocky. It's great to be on, and we're excited about what's going on with Masters. We're excited about what's going on in the industry. To answer your question, what's a little background of myself. I'm an attorney, and I'm currently at Haystack ID. I'm the Discovery Counsel and Vice President of Analytics and Review Operations. And it's been involved in Masters in a long time. I originally got involved in this world of e-discovery right out of law school. I went to Chicago Kent and graduated in 2000 and moved to, I was originally, I practiced customs, import, export, and international law.
Wow.
And so it's a little different area, a little different, expertise. But I ended up moving to DC and working on some international litigation that had to do with customs and import and export law. But with that international litigation, I kind of just fell into litigation, and then all of a sudden I was doing more discovery focus, and ended up doing this new thing called e-discovery. Due to my technological background and interest. So kind of just was thrown at me.
And
so
and what was the technology background? Did you actually, like, in your undergrad or anything, or just an interest?
Just an interest, and then law school. I worked at the help desk and worked in the IT department at law school. So that was my first official job in the IT area. But it was more, more with networks and more servers, networks, and exciting stuff at school, in law school. So not only did I get to learn, but I also got to work there. So
Right.
very
Nice.
exciting.
Great.
Very exciting. So, and at the time, Chicago Kent had a great program. I think they still do, but they had a great program. One of the very first programs called eLearn. At the time, this revolutionary concept of using computers, using laptops, being able to plug your laptop in. It was actually the very first program in the country for law schools that had that program.
Yeah, they were a real, they were ahead of the curve on all that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it's pretty exciting. Pretty exciting. Now we all do it, and now all of our kids do it due to this great thing called COVID. So it's nothing new now, but at the time it was definitely revolutionary.
Yeah. Great.
So
all right. So I'm sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you.
Oh no. So that's it. All you.
All right. Well, Rocky, I guess we want to talk a little bit about now, more specifically about the Masters Conference.
So
steer that ship.
Yeah. So obviously, Robert was the driving force, and I want to get to like the current how you guys have taken his mission. But before we get there, a little bit of background, so yes, big conference, you do it now in multiple cities. What's the real, e-discovery, but what's the real focus of the conference? How do you see the Masters Conference differentiating yourself from, like you said earlier, there were only ILTA and Legal Tech before, but nowadays there's 40 different conferences, and even Clock is next week, or by the time we release this week, half of Clock now is e-discovery related, and topics having to do related to e-discovery. Obviously, a little bit more operations focused, but still, and then you got Georgetown, and you've got University of Florida, and you've got there's all kinds of conferences out there. So what makes the Masters Conference special and open to anyone?
Yeah, I know the microphone is open.
Yep.
So I can jump in to start. As mentioned, when we started it, there was none, and as you're saying, now there's many. And when we realized that was going on, Bruce's model of let's do this in Chicago sort of hit a chord with us, because even then there was no RelFest there, right? So there's another one. but so our primary focus is to serve markets, cities that don't typically have access to these conferences. So what ends up happening is, like, Denver's coming up. There's no typically an e-discovery conference there. So they get to come in, who normally wouldn't travel, have budget to travel, come in and attend that, and they're all thought leaders and sort of build that community. So our goal is to build those 12 times over the course of the year in various cities, and certainly we'll serve DC, New York, and others that always have access to those. But even with Chicago recently, the tempo is a little bit different, right? It's not the big fun, mariachi bands and everything that Relativity Fest is. It's the hey, let's get into business and talk about these topics with a group of 100+ people, and everyone sort of interacts there. So the format's different, and so it produces a different type of conversation throughout the day. And so that's why these different cities are very popular, is because.
So, and let me just interject, and any of you can comment on this. It seems to me, you mentioned Relativity Fest. There's been a rise in what are really user conferences, as opposed to independent, if you will, technology shows. So Relativity Fest, ILTA is really a user conference, a member user conference. IPRO, I know, has started up one again. Yeah. Has that influenced you at all, tailored what's going on, or not really?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Yeah, we also try to keep.
I want to hear, sorry, Bruce, I want to hear yours, but then I want to hear, Marla was shaking her head no. So
no. Wrong.
Well, we probably have a similar take on this, but the idea here is we want to make sure this is educational as well, right? We're not looking to make this product specific. The sponsors really help drive a lot of this, right? But when we talk to the sponsors about the panels, we want to make sure it's an educational panel, not pushing a product or a service. If somebody wants that, they can talk to those sponsors directly and get that information. The other thing we really try to do is, because we're going to the different cities this year, we're going to 12 different cities, 10 in the US, Canada, and London. We try to find some new folks to be on the panels. We try to find some local presence, right? We try to find some people that aren't your typical, speakers at all the conferences. So we're getting some fresh perspective. We're getting some, people that are in the battle lines that are doing this day to day. So we really do spend a lot of time with each and every one of these conferences, find some new folks.
What percentage of the speakers do you think are like consistent through most of the conferences versus are really just coming for one specific one?
It's a good question, because every city, we'll probably get about maybe 25 to 30% of those speakers that will be on that, be on panels, year over year at that particular city. But traveling to different cities, very few. Most of the repetitive ones are more the sponsors, and they're the moderators, but the actual panelists, maybe a handful will travel, and they're not going to all of them. So it's a really good mix.
Okay.
And another thing, I'm going to jump in here that we also do is that the majority of our panels, I would have to say 75% or higher, are somebody from a law firm or corporate legal department, or even a government entity. So what we try to do is we try to have a representation from each one on each panel. So you get a different perspective. Now, we could have the same topic in different cities, but because we have different panelists, the discussion itself is always different. And there's always something to gain and learn from it.
Cool.
Right. And let me add just one thing. And this sort of goes to what you were asking, and both you, Tom, and you, Rachi, were asking. It's compared to the user. Some of the conferences are more user based, or they're more national. Part of our differentiator is we are focused on the community, and we're focused on networking. We're focused on creating that network within that community. So, for instance, we've been talking about Denver. We're talking about Dallas, where I currently am. It's definitely been our conferences have allowed us to create that community within that area, within that region, and has allowed people to network and talk. So it's broader than just a user. It's broader than just a relativity or a ILTA, because it crosses into many different segments of our industry. You know, as Marla said, it's government, it's, you know, law firm, it's corporate, it's vendor, you know, but then it's also it's a good way to bring people together and create that community. And it's expanded. I don't know, maybe I'm jumping the gun, but let me just say it's expanded from e-discovery into larger data, into information governance, into cyber, into
that was going to be my next question was,
Yep.
your scope is expanded to IG and investigations.
Exactly.
Yeah, which
Exactly.
are all
Modern data
Exactly.
is what we call
And
it.
so what I like to describe it as, it's a nexus point between technology and law. And it's a spot where it can bring people together, it can create a community, and it allows that community to network. You know, I think Rick mentioned, you know, we're usually about 100, a little over 100, but we don't want it really big. We don't want the ILTA. We don't want the legal tech / legal week. We don't want the thousands.
Right.
We want it small, so it's intimate, and we can actually meet people and have real conversations instead of, "Hi, Tom, here's my business card." Hi, you know, like we just want to, we want to actually truly create that ability to have real relationships.
right. So one thing judges have complained about for a long time, as well as commentators like us, is the lack of education and the lack of skill level of the participants. What are you seeing as far as knowledge level for the people coming in the door?
Yeah, and let me follow up on that, because that was exactly where I was going to go in regards.
I knew that, Rocky. I knew that.
Well,
Because
I know we're just
saying.
again that mind meld.
Like the Vulcan mind
Like
meld.
the
I know.
same brain.
It's scary. It's really scary sometimes.
It is.
Nice.
But you know, one thing that especially with some of the smaller type conferences that exist throughout the industry, a lot of people complain that they're the same people coming through the same conferences over and over again, and that it doesn't really help if you're trying to learn from scratch, or you're really starting to, you know, you're a year or two into the industry and you're trying to figure things out, that they're really geared towards a much higher level. Is where does the Masters Conference fit in there, which gets into Tom's question about the skill levels of the attendees?
And I can jump in there because like as a company who is also sponsored and a part of every single one of them, all of our sponsors and panels curate, you know, sort of top level, you know, thought leadership for their sessions. And so because we're not doing a conference that has, you know, 15, 30, 50 sessions over the course of 3 or 4 days, it's one day. So the speakers are, you know, really well vetted, and even, but I will say some of them are first and second, third time speakers because they have all this great information, but they're afraid to speak at like a RelFest or a legal tech or something. This gives them the opportunity to be a part of a panel and contribute some really good perspectives on the subject. And so I would say all of the sponsors who have panels and all the, you know, organizations who have panels, they do a really good job, and we work them to bring in the right people to talk about that subject. As an example, I speak on modern data all the time, all of them, and I've been doing this since last year. But I will say, I'm looking at my PowerPoint, every time I, you know, go through the planning sessions, it's a whole different conversation from one market, one city to the next, and it's all around how we're solving modern data, right? Like how are we doing Slack and Teams, and so the perspectives we get from corporate in-house to government, you know, are really, really important for those folks. And because we're from city to city, we also notice that there are different challenges from market to market.
And how about more from the attendee side? Where do you see the skill level of not the speakers, not the sponsors, but the actual people who are attending, in comparison to other conferences? Do you find that it's a more
All
of
levels.
all levels?
we're getting all levels. One of the things that we started doing at the end of last year, beginning of this year, is reaching out to paralegal associations,
Ah,
reaching out to paralegal schools, law schools.
I mean, the people who really do the work.
Exactly, because the attorneys will look at the paralegals and go figure it out.
Yeah,
So,
right.
you know, we worked with NALA on a couple conferences to get the paralegal CLE also, and they,
Nice.
after our Miami
Nice.
conference, which by the way was one of our new cities this year back in January, I had several paralegals come up to me and go, "Thank you so much," because they don't get this type of education.
Right.
And even though most of them there were very new to technology side, they got something out of it. And not only that, besides the education, now they've met people and other attorneys and corporate legal people who live in the area, and now they're networking with them several months
There you go.
later. And that's another one of the things that we want. We want to introduce people. We want to get that, like Rick and Kevin said, they want to get that community together in that area, because you don't realize how big a legal community is in, let's say, Miami.
Yeah. So
Right.
kind of along those lines, one thing that's, as you know, all of you probably know, near and dear to my heart is the solo and small firms
Yeah.
who kind of feel neglected in the whole e-discovery space. You getting any attendees from that arena? Any
Oh,
small firms?
We
Yeah,
do.
absolutely. You know, it's
Right.
you know, because we try to, because we're bringing this, you know, to the different cities, makes it easier for them to attend, right? They don't
Right.
have to take 2, 3, 4 days, you know, out of their busy schedule. Because the smaller firms, you know, their time is very valuable. So to have
Yes.
something come to them, you know, even if they come for half a day, right?
Yep.
That they can get 3 really good, you know, educational panels available to them, and even come to that to the networking that evening when we do it as well. And once again, going to these other cities, you know, it makes it just accessible for a lot more people, both
Yeah.
from, you know, as Marla mentioned, you know, the paralegal level, or as you're saying, Tom, you know, the smaller firms, you know, that they want to be educated,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
want the opportunity. And we also look for some of those folks to be on the panels as well, because they bring a really different perspective, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
do you guys have anything, you know, a lot of what I'm hearing is around community and bringing the people together. Do you do any ongoing beyond, like, you know, popping into a city, hey, we're here, let's bring everyone together, okay, now we're out? Like, no. Is there any ongoing efforts that the Masters Conference is behind in terms of encouraging ongoing networking, communication, and education?
Yeah.
So
Go ahead, Rick.
I was gonna say, funny you bring that up. Masters just invested in a platform that will help, encourage that type of behavior. So one of them is per city, the app that is being deployed will allow them to interact within the app to communicate and have multiple conversations, ask speakers questions after the fact. That ultimately we want it to build into a overall community across the country and around the world. But right now we're starting from one to the next and trying to create the behavior around it, similar to, you know, Rachi and Tom when we were, you know, the Yahoo groups that we had back in the 2000s, right? Like it's
Yeah.
you know, we're looking to build a very similar thing there.
Similar to. So you mentioned that you know, amongst the 12 cities this year, it includes Canada, which is Toronto or somewhere else.
Yes, Toronto.
And London. Is this the first year that the Masters is going international, or has it been okay?
Pre-pandemic, I'm sorry to quit cutting you off, Rocky, but pre-pandemic, we were in London for what, 3-4 years prior to the pandemic?
Yeah, 3 or 4 years.
Right.
And then Toronto is a new city for us.
Okay.
So we are working with Carolyn Angler up there to bring it to Canada.
Cool. And what do you see in terms of differences when you go international versus when you're doing the conference in the US?
So I
don't
can't
know,
speak from experience. So Robert, Robert would attend the one in London. This will be my first one this year. So
Okay.
we can, but my understanding from previous conversations I've had with Robert and those or at least London, different conversations altogether. It's some of
I would
it's
think
certainly
so.
international, how it sort of plays with the US, but really it's going to be topics that are, they're going to help build the curriculum. We just facilitate the conference itself.
Right. And I'd say some of the bigger topics in the UK previously were privacy, were data transfer. It's I think we all know it's called e-disclosure, not e-discovery. So it's just it's a slightly different twist, but it's focused on the concerns, the issues top of mind of the UK, of London. And now we're going to do Toronto too. So
And
it's the content is going to be driven by the local community. What is of interest to you? What do you what do you want to talk about? What should we address?
cool. And do you guys have plans to go elsewhere?
We
Or am I
do.
asking-
We do. Yes. There's
Okay.
been talk of some other countries, some south of us, but we'll leave that open. But there's definitely interest to continue.
I can speak to Sao Paulo. We've had conversations with some folks
Yes.
who want to spin it up there, and I've had some planning calls, and then COVID hit, so we haven't started those yet. We're getting through this year, and we'll see what happens next year. But so for those listening, we are open, and we just have to build the case and find the venue and all of that. So nothing is off the table until it's off the table.
How about the Pacific Rim? Any interest out there?
Yep,
Definitely.
I'd love to go.
Definitely. Yes.
We're open.
It's
We're
called,
open.
where does Rick want to go?
How about
Yeah.
Iceland?
Yeah.
Masters
Yeah.
Conference Iceland.
There's a market in Iceland. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm
Okay,
going to
so
jump
let's-
in for a second because one of the
Yeah.
things we haven't discussed is another way where we're unique is that we hold our conferences at law firms. We don't
Okay.
hold
Right.
them in a
Good point.
Hilton like you do at Legal
Right.
Week. We don't hold them in another hotel or conference center. We're actually in a large law firm, and these law firms host us. So, Holland and Knight, Reed Smith, Seyfarth Shaw, which we were just in Chicago. We're going to be at Silly Austin next week, or sorry, in 2 weeks for DC. So that is another way that we differentiate ourselves. It's not a conference center.
Right.
Yeah, and
Right.
to add on to that, one of the benefits of having it at the law firm keeps our costs down.
Mhm.
Sure.
We pass that along to the attendees. It's very, very inexpensive to attend a master's conference. And we do that on purpose. Once
Mhm.
again, to allow more people to attend, not just the travel costs, but the attendee costs. So
Yeah. Great.
For what we call the law firm segment,
Yeah.
it's very reasonably priced. So that's anybody in a law firm, corporate legal department, or government.
Great.
and we try to also partner with some of the other groups like we and ASETS and allow some discounts for folks that are
For the members.
participating in those groups.
And
Yeah.
eDiscovery Today. Don't forget about Doug.
Excellent. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about Robert a little bit.
I'm
You
sorry.
know,
I'm sorry, Rocky.
Yeah.
Just to interrupt quickly. The Earl. What's the website? We talked about all these different things they can do. What's the website that people can go to?
Themastersconference.com.
There we go. Thanks. Thanks.
So Robert was a true force. I think that there's no doubt about that. I mean, even I was with him a couple months before he passed away, and he was definitely sick, but he was still opinionated, and he was pushing an agenda, and he was strong even when he wasn't physically strong. How has the conference changed, and what do you see as his legacy that you're able to take forward? So it's a two-part question for each of you. Just kind of where is it going, and what are you doing to maintain the strength that Robert brought to the conference?
Well, I'll start here. We're all here because of Robert. That's where it starts, right? We all engaged with Robert and saw his vision, and like I said, when I said, hey, maybe you should bring this to Chicago, within 2 weeks, boom, that was there, and it's grown, right? And his personality, we all really like Robert. He was not, he was just a good friend, and he cared about everybody. So keeping his legacy is, kind of what we've already talked about here, right? Having a conference that bring a conference to the people, making it accessible, right? Bringing in, new thought leaders to the panels, right? But also, probably and most importantly, is the networking, getting just to meet people in the industry. That's what it was about. Besides the Masters Conference, he also had his golf tournament, right? And it was just about bringing people together and sharing that common knowledge and helping those that are new, right, to be able to give them some access to learn and grow.
Yeah, Bruce covered the last piece there is my major sort of not takeaway, but focus, right? That is folks who weren't used to speaking. I remember hearing when we had the Zoom meeting for Robert's passing and sort of celebration of life, multiple people said, I just couldn't believe he was always telling me to speak on these panels. And they were like, I'm not a speaker, but he would always pull that out of folks to be a better version or a thought leader or whatever you want to call it, right? But to step out of a comfort zone and do something different. He did that with me. He's done that with probably all of us at Masters, and certainly a lot of our speakers. So we mentioned earlier, part of the thing is to pull people in and put them on sessions that to get to hear their perspective. If they only chime in for 5 or 10 minutes, that's fine, right? Like, and if they're like, this isn't for me, that's fine too. At least they're exploring it. They have an avenue to do that. So I'll just say that's my big piece of part of his legacy and getting that to be a part of the community of just comfort around each other and not being afraid to speak and giving people the platform to do that.
And
Right.
for
Let me
me-
just add, it's it originally started in Washington, D.C., moved to Chicago, then we expanded to New York, San Francisco. We started expanding. So in a way, following, just continuing what Rick's saying and Bruce saying, we're continuing what he created and started, and we're taking it to more people. We're expanding it by now taking it to other, to Dallas, to Denver, to Atlanta, to we're expanding it now internationally, to Toronto and maybe Brazil and whatnot. So we're taking that ability to allow people to, first of all, to create that community, but then to allow speakers, to allow practitioners to grow in their own career, just learn how to speak, to join panels, to share their knowledge and experience. So it's continuing what he started. I think that's the main legacy.
Hey, Marla, did I hear you say, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did I hear you say you were working with Carolyn Anger in Toronto?
Yes.
Oh,
Carolyn.
she's great. Yeah, big shout out to Carolyn. I've known her for years.
She is great.
She's wonderful and very experienced. Yeah.
So going back to Rocky's question, it's not only about the education and getting people to speak, but it's also the networking. There are some people out there that, they're not comfortable going to a legal week, meeting 7,000 of their newest and dearest friends. That's a lot of people, and it can be overwhelming, especially coming out of a pandemic. So by having it around 100 people, it's more manageable. People are a little bit more comfortable. And I love actually being at the conferences, introducing people. Rick Clark from Cloud9. This is Kevin Clark from Haystack, even though they've known each other for years. But that's where it gets it for me too, is just introducing people, getting people to start talking and learning from one another. Because there's a lot of conversations that come out of that. Just by sitting down at lunchtime, people are talking about, what's worked for them and what hasn't worked for them. And people are giving each other ideas. Right. And that's what we want to hear. We want to hear that conversation. And we hope that they take it outside of the conference, which from what I understand does happen quite frequently.
Good. Great.
So Tom, I think we're running up against the clock. No surprise with this group. But why don't we wrap things up with 1 or 2 takeaway questions from you to wrap things up, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so the first question I always ask everybody is the most important e-discovery question imaginable. Beatles or
did.
Stones?
Stones.
Stones.
Beatles.
Beatles.
I'm gonna
Ugh.
say, Bruce, you're aging yourself
Evenly
on that one.
No, 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 no. Stones fans unite. There we go. All right.
My-
Rocky
my
shaking
first-
his head.
My
Beatles
first album
all
I
the
ever bought
way.
was Paul McCartney and Wings Band on the Run. So
Oh.
there you go.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, Rocky's going, yeah. Okay,
I'm
whatever.
like, okay.
We'll talk hockey later.
Rocky, just as a side to you, you probably heard that Bill Kreutzmann left the Dead and Company tour the other
I
night.
know,
He
I know.
he had a concert here with a group called Billy and the Kids.
Yep, I watched
And
it.
for those who don't know, Bill Kreutzmann was the founding member and founding drummer of the Grateful Dead. And so in his concert that night with Billy and the Kids, not only did they do a 45-minute version of Dark Star, they also did a 30-minute version of the other one. So for you geriatric rockers in the audience, that's the Wayback Machine.
Yeah, that's
So here's a more
and with a really cool New Orleans-based group he sat in with.
Yes, the musicians were all performing at Jazz Fest in their own bands, and he pulled them together. It was quite a musical treat if you like old music.
If you're
I like music. I just like music.
Yeah. Okay.
So
let's
on a more serious note, the last question we always ask: if you could spend a day with anybody in our profession, they don't have to be alive, living or dead, and our profession is defined extremely broadly. We've had answers ranging from Socrates to Abraham Lincoln to seriously, I mean, people. Yeah. So anybody you could spend a day with, and it doesn't have to be doing work related. It doesn't have to be deduping or document review. Who would that person be, and what would we do? What would you do? And I'll start again in the batting order. Richard Clark, what's your response?
So when I first saw that question, I didn't think of like way back. So I was always thinking very much in our industry and having access to all of the thought leaders, and like we're seeing them on a constant basis. I think back to, and not to take the easy and semi-obvious route, but Robert and I started this together. It'd be great to have a day with him in, whether it was New York or Chicago, because those were some of his favorite cities, and just spend the day just catching up and showing him all the cool things that we've done.
Right. Marla?
Rick stole my thunder on that one, because I was going to say Robert also.
That's all right.
Yep.
Obviously the last couple years of his life, we weren't able to be together because of the pandemic. And even though we talked on the phone and we were on our conference calls, I just really missed being with him and just feeding off of his energy and just watching him work his magic. So it would have been, in our industry, it would definitely be Robert also.
And what would you specifically want to do with him?
Yeah, what would you want to do?
Where would you
come
want
on.
to
Okay,
it's go hang out?
Easy. Padre baseball game.
There we go. There we go. And thanks for the shout out to Tony Gwynn this morning, Marla.
Yeah, well, of course, it was Tony's birthday yesterday too, by the way. 5.5.
Yep.
Like to hit
Bruce?
5.5.
Okay, so if we could really be esoteric here in who we would spend a day with, how about Mo Berg, a spy from World War I?
Ooh.
He was actually a baseball player.
I was going to say, didn't he play for the Red Sox?
Red Sox, Cubs, few other teams.
Yeah.
Catcher.
That's
And how are you going to connect? It's got to have some connection to our industry.
Well,
so how are you
aren't spies part of investigations? Aren't they trying to figure things out and get information?
Yeah, sure. I can go for that.
Just something completely fun.
And what would you do? What would you do with Mo?
Probably play catch.
What
else would you do with the baseball?
Field of Dreams, right?
Yeah,
there you go.
Play some
all right.
catch.
And Kevin?
So my answer was originally going to also be Roberts, but I am going to change that because two people have taken that answer. And so I want to mix it up a little, but it would have been Robert probably watching sci-fi, watching Star Wars together.
Oh, yeah, right.
There's a lot of Star Wars to catch up on that he never got to see. But I am going to change my answer, and I would say Winston Churchill, one of my heroes, and he faced very tough times. He had losses, he had wins, he had losses, and so just a very interesting person. And just would love to get to spend time with him, hear about his life. I've heard he likes to talk, and so maybe have a drink with him, a cigar, and enjoy a day with him. So
Got
that'll
a
be my
picture hanging
revised-
over my desk here that Gail took when she was in London the last time, shortly before she left us. And it's the cigar shop that Winston frequented, and it's the chair that he sat in when he
Oh,
smoked. They still have the chair in the
Nice.
shop with a big sign on it. Don't sit here. Yeah.
Nice,
Gail
nice.
took a picture of the chair, and I've got it up over the
And-
on the edge of my desk.
come on, the next part of the
So
story
nice.
when Gail then sat in the chair and got
Of course,
arrested.
Of
I was
course.
waiting for that. I was gonna say, of course, Gail sat in the chair.
Gail immediately took that as a challenge, and yeah,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, hey, I want to thank all of you. This has been great as always. Thanks for not just bringing some life to the name of Robert Childress. So I'm sure a lot of people, especially over the last couple of years, didn't get to know him, both because of his illness and COVID, but also continuing the show and expanding the show. I love the way you've grown it and the emphasis on networking. I couldn't agree with that more. I love that aspect of it. So we really thank you. Your next one is in 2 weeks in DC. Did I hear you say that?
Yes,
Yes.
and that will be a day
Okay.
and a half, actually.
Okay, great. And we encourage everybody to go look at the website for the complete schedule. I'm looking at it. It looks like you've got DC, Denver, Toronto, Seattle, London, Columbus, Ohio, New York City, and Atlanta.
Yes.
So folks, there's going to be a master's conference near you, and take advantage of it and get out there and network with everybody. Rocky, any last words?
All good from my side.
All
Just
right.
thanks everyone for joining.
Thank everybody for joining. Thanks for your time, and hope to see you all in person now that we are back to live events again. And we'll see you all again, to our listeners, next time in the eDiscovery channel.